Hey, so I wanted to ask you today, how do you feel as you go about life? Do you constantly feel like you don't measure up? Are you constantly afraid, whether of past mistakes that you've made that'll catch up with you, or constantly afraid of mistakes that you might make in the future? This is all very, very common. In fact, I've often lived my life the same way. It's really easy to get into this rut of thinking about all the mistakes that you've made and all the mistakes that you might make in the future, and that can leave you kind of paralyzed from actually doing what it is that God's called you to do. But there's a verse relating to Easter, the resurrection, in which we see both of these things, fear and also joy, in the same people at the same time, and that's okay. That's a very normal thing. It says in Matthew chapter 28, verse 8, "So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples." This was right after they got the news that Jesus was risen from the dead, and they were told to go and tell the disciples the news that Jesus was not in the tomb. And in that moment, it says that they were both afraid and full of joy. And I think the same could be true of us pretty much every day of our lives as well. It's normal to have fear or even guilt about our past mistakes. That's normal. And yet what we do with that fear and how we live in spite of that fear can make all the difference. It says they were afraid, yet full of joy. I think we can have the same thing. Fear doesn't have to paralyze us from doing the things that we know we need to do in life. I think, at least in part, the kind of fear that these ladies had was that they were in awe of God. They had a reverence for God. They knew that God can do anything. If God can raise the dead, then God can certainly do anything in their lives as well. So they had that fear, that reverent awe of God, and yet they also were full of joy. And they didn't let that fear paralyze them. They ran to tell the disciples the good news of Jesus' resurrection. I think our fear, our awe of God, can motivate us even to do what God's called us to do. When we have a reverent awe of God, we can know that God loves us, and therefore we can go out and share that same love with other people as well. We can have fear and awe of God, and also joy to tell other people of God's love for them. And I think that their fear also wasn't being afraid of God. Jesus said in another place, the only person we have to fear in life is God himself. He has the power to destroy both body and spirit in hell. And yet he went on to say that we don't have to fear God like that because God loves us. He counts even the hairs on our heads. We're more precious to him than anything else that he's made. God loves you. No matter what you've done in the past, no matter what you may do in the future, he loves you. And he invites you to rest in his joy, to participate with him in sharing the gospel with all the people in all the world. So yes, definitely have a fear of God. That's the beginning of knowledge. And yet, based on that fear, that awe of God, that reverence for God, go and do the things that God's called you to do in love. God bless you, and we'll see you again next time.